Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Preference. We're glad you made it. We wanted to talk about psychedelics and other things like that that could really help with regard to therapy. There's a whole group of veterans out there that have been pushing for it. And we have an article that we want to read through for you here to kind of give you an update and give you our thoughts along the way. This is completed by Military Times. Came out July 28th, so not that long ago. And we wanted to share it with you here today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. Look, here's the thing, is that if we walk around with our eyes closed, we don't even know what's happening, right? There's so many things that are happening behind the scenes, some of which you may want to have happen for yourself or for brothers and sisters out there. And if you don't know about it, you can't support it. If you don't support it, it might not make it through. So with that, if this is something that you agree with and you feel is something that should be looked into, you should absolutely reach out to your congressional representatives and let them know as well. All right, so the headline here, guys, I'm going to read through a little bit and we'll pass it around. The headline is Veterans Push for Psychedelic Therapy, but MDMA Application Struggles. Now, moving on here, it was a landmark moment for the psychedelic movement. The Department of Veterans Affairs top doctor stood on stage praising advocates who have spent decades promoting the health potential of mind-altering drugs. In an unannounced appearance at the New York Psychedelics Conference, which that's pretty interesting in itself, that if you're talking about VA's Dr. Sharif Ellenhall showing up unannounced. That's kind of interesting in itself, I would think. So in an unannounced appearance at a New York Psychedelics Conference, the VA's Dr. Sharif Ellenhall said his agency was ready to start rolling out MDMA-assisted therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder as soon as regulators approve it. The VA has to be first, as we have been, with mental health needs for our veterans, Ellenhall told attendees at the May meeting, and I would absolutely concur that the VA does need to lean forward in this avenue. He has also highlighted the awesome groundbreaking research on drugs by MAPS, or the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, the leading nonprofit advocating for the medical and legal use of hallucinogenic drugs. Okay, I'm going to do one more paragraph and we're going to kick it around. So, but expectations for MDMA's first of a kind approval unraveled a few weeks later when the Food and Drug Administration advisors voted overwhelmingly against the drug, citing flawed data, questionable research conduct, and potential safety and additional risks. The panel's recommendation isn't binding, but the FDA is widely expected to delay or decline approval when it makes its decision by mid-August. Randy, what are your thoughts on this? And then we'll kick it down to Chris.
I like that the VA is leaning forward. So I like that the VA is looking for solutions to a problem in our community that is a huge problem. Love it. I don't know personally a whole lot about MDMA. I've had some folks reach out to me and say, these sorts of tools can be pretty life altering. I'm going to probably get lit up in the comments down below, but I'm going to just go ahead and give my opinion. I tend to be one of those people that leans away from the use of drugs, the use of, any sort of medicines, pills, unless absolutely necessary. And I do understand for a lot of these veterans, it is absolutely necessary. But my personal philosophy, I don't drink a whole lot. I don't use any illegal drugs. I don't take any medication, or very limited, medications when necessary. So for me personally, I have found just an easier path in life by minimizing substances that are, not normally what humans would ingest. I totally respect that there is other opinions out there, and I'm not telling you how to live your life. This is just me personally. I'm glad that the military and the VA is leaning forward on this. I just tend to look towards other solutions that don't involve any sort of chemicals, when addressing issues in my life, if I can use those tools in my tool chest first. I know there's a lot of viewers that are going to disagree or have an issue with what I just said, but it's just me personally. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you for your thoughts.
So I was raised in a pharmacy. My dad was the pharmacist and owner of the pharmacy. I also was raised in New Orleans, and he made it very clear. He said, you could drink all you want. And if you get in trouble, you're going to stay in jail, and I'll pick you up the next day. But he said, but if you ever do drugs, I'm going to kill you. Because the things that you see when you're around addicts and the number of times that, people broke into the pharmacy looking for narcotics, it's pretty scary. And as a result, I never needed it. I'm like Randy, I never needed it. I had, beer whenever I needed it. And, but, chose mostly to try to either use exercise or, some type of mindfulness to get me through what I needed to get through. And that's worked out great for me. Now, at the same time, I didn't get PTSD. I didn't actually serve in a combat zone. And, my life's been relatively stable and easy for the most part when you think about all the things that could have happened and the things that our soldiers over the past 25 years have seen. So that said, I do think, based upon the information that I have from people that I trust, that in certain circumstances, in the right circumstances, this could be game changing for a subset of veterans who really need it. And so, like Randy, I applaud the VA's efforts here, and I support it. I do think that we should be thinking outside the box for some of the cases where this might be useful and helpful. I do come back to remember back in the days when we were growing up. I think it was the White Shadow had that one episode where that kid took PHP and was on top of the roof, getting ready to jump off because he thought he could fly. And the military has actually had units that they experimented with PHP for battle purposes. So again, I think it's consistent in terms of how the military is trying to think outside the box, and I believe it's something that we should look into for those edge cases where people have run out of options to actually get healthy, and why not? Let's use data. Let's make sure it's controlled. I'm sure all of that's going to happen. And I know that they go back and forth, and if the data is good data, bad data, whatever. But I applaud this effort, and I would be supportive. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've so look, you have your own personal thoughts, then you have kind of what you would do for yourself, and then you have the kind of what's for the greater good, right? So for me, I, again, like Chris, I don't have any sort of, well, I guess you'd have to ask my wife for real, but I don't think I have any sort of mental PTSD or anything like that. But I do know folks who have said that they have, I guess, realized true relief from the signs and symptoms and all of that stuff that surround PTSD, and they're able to live a more normal life because of it. I will say that I am a fan of trying really anything in the right setting, right? Not just going on your own, but with the advice of a doctor and the supervision and all that type of stuff to try to get better. And I'll tell you that, just because it comes from a pharmacy doesn't mean that it's going to be super great for you and you're not going to have any adverse effects, right? You're just hoping that the adverse effects are less than the effects of not taking it, right? So it's this weird environment, I think, when it comes to medications. But I have heard good things. Essentially, what I've heard is that it helps your mind. If you think of your mind as just this a whole infrastructure of roads, right? Well, then when you get PTSD, some of these roads and on-ramps got tweaked out and are pointing the wrong directions, and they're not connected anymore. By taking these types of drugs, it helps to basically untangle all of that. And then when they come back, they line back up correctly, so to speak. So it's kind of like a reset almost, right? So, which kind of makes sense. I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about this further than a few sentences. But the reality is that it is something that's being talked about, and there are folks out there that do benefit from it. I'm going to kind of bust through a little more of this article and see if we could pick out any more nuggets, even though it's psychedelics and not marijuana. All right. So the potential rejection has sent shockwaves through the psychedelic community, including combat veterans who have spent years lobbying for the drug, which is also known as ecstasy or Molly. The advocacy effort has long been intertwined with MAPS, which has funded or supported some of the most vocal veterans supporting psychedelic therapy. Dr. Harold Kudler of Duke University met with veterans and MAPS leaders while serving as the VA's top consultant on mental health services. He believes FDA's experts are justifiably skeptical of the science behind the drug, which he says has been drowned out by messaging from MAPS and its leaders. Rick Doblin, who began pursuing MDMA's approval in the mid-1980s. That's a long time, the mid-80s. I remember the 80s pretty well, mostly. Rick is the most persuasive advocate within the scientific community that I've ever seen. You want to believe him because he's offering you something you sorely need, an effective treatment for PTSD, Kudler said. But I think the FDA committee caught a glimpse of how much of this is Rick's zeal and how much is real. Wow. That is a big, big statement. It really is appearing in this article to kind of have some little bit of pointing fingers and, maybe we don't have as much behind this, and it's a lot of lip service and, like they said, the zeal of it all. And I get it. Being somebody who's advocated for something for, decades and really feeling like you're getting to the point of realization, you are going to be excited and tout it, and you're going to negate talking about any drawbacks or negative effects, even if you do know them. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts just on that little bit. Randy, what do you think?
Yeah, I appreciate the article. It's interesting. Again, this is not something that I know a whole lot about, but there is a palpable sense, that the community that is experiencing PTSD within the veteran spirit needs some form of relief. It's real. I get that. There needs to be solutions. So, there's Randy personally, and then there's this whole, what's best for the veterans community. Personally, I tend to lean a little bit more libertarian. I'm not really too much of a Republican, definitely not a Democrat. Tend to be more libertarian. So when solutions arise and they're reasonable, I tend to lean on the side of freedom for people to explore these things within reasonable confines. I'm not talking about a free-for-all drug fest out on every corner, but I do tend to be a little bit more, willing to explore some of these solutions for people if they feel like they need it in their life. So that's one part of it. PTSD, primarily, not always, but primarily related to the experiences that service members have while deployed, particularly in a combat environment. That is where, not all, but a lot of these PTSD problems are coming from. The quickest, easiest, and most effective solution globally to deal with this is to get to the left of it and prevent stop the United States from getting involved in foreign wars that it does not need to be involved in, unnecessary conflicts that it does not need to be involved in, and stop putting soldiers and airmen and sailors and the whole military community in harm's way unless absolutely necessary. If you want to stop PTSD and get to the left of it, don't send Americans to some, conflict in some far-flung land that has no benefit really to the American, the American nation. That'll stop a whole lot of these PTSD cases from ever being a thing. So that's my personal opinion. I'm open to solutions that are novel, and I think the best, biggest, greatest solution to PTSD is prevent it from ever occurring in the first place. So that's me. Chris, kick it over to you.
Yeah, and just doing a little bit more research on this, and DARPA had actually spent quite 27 million on a study around this, and so I'm guessing that they've done appropriate amount of research. But this was actually something that in this article. In the research article, it says the goal of the new wave of psychedelic research is not mind control or brain alteration, but liberation of the mind from cycles of rumination and trauma and empowerment to change patterns of self-destruction to the affirmation of life. And so if we are finding that some of these instruments will further protect and give some of our soldiers the opportunity to heal from their physical and mental wounds. Again, it's hard not to be at least for it until otherwise research or data shown that it either has limited or no impact and hopefully not adversarial impact. So, more to come here, but certainly a topic worth consideration and research, and it's something that I'm going to keep looking into.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through a couple stories here real quick in this article, just for the awareness piece. Get your guys' thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap it up. So stick with us here. So it goes on to say that in addition to the shortcomings in Lyco's studies, FDA panelists voiced concerns about separate allegations that some MAPS-affiliated researchers suppressed negative study results or coached patients to inflate positive results. The FDA says that it's investigating those claims. Casey Tylick, an Army veteran, says he didn't experience any of that while participating in the study. When he asked researchers for guidance in evaluating the effect of the drug, Tylick says he was repeatedly rebuffed and told he had to rate the treatment without any outside influence. Tylick says he was pessimistic going into the trial, but credits MDMA-assisted therapy with resolving. That's a big word when you're talking about PTSD symptoms. Resolving anger, anxiety, and trauma stemming from a rocket attack in Iraq. It basically rewrote that memory in my mind and how it functioned, Tylick said. I was able to just kind of let it go and not be hung up on it. Cudler and other researchers say that they want to see the MDMA results confirmed in larger studies that have no links to psychedelic community. That work would take years. Veterans who support the treatment say it would jeopardize patients suffering from PTSD who have been helped by antidepressants, who have not been helped by antidepressants and other existing therapies. The suicide rate among veterans is 70% higher than the general population, according to the government figures, with an 18 veteran suicides per day in 2021. And obviously that's why we're talking about this, right? Is that therapies to help with any sort of distress with regard to PTSD is a really, really important thing. Moving on to the next one here, John Lebecki, who served in both the Marines and the Army, says he tried to kill himself 5 times after returning from deployment to Iraq in 2006. After years of struggling with PTSD, he enrolled in a MAPS trial in 2014. That's a long time ago. he credits MDMA assisted therapy with curing his condition. Curing. That is, again, I mean, when you're talking about words like this in the context of PTSD, it's almost unbelievable unless you hear it from somebody, right? So not helps me manage with, help me deal. No, cured. Big deal. Since then, Lebecki has told his story hundreds of times in media interviews, congressional hearings, and private meetings with military officials and federal lawmakers, including conservatives like Senator Rand Paul and Dan Crenshaw. Lebecki worked as a consultant for MAPS for more than 5 years, but he rejects the idea that he was merely advancing the agenda of psychedelic boosters who want to see the drugs outright legalized. I'm not in this for ending the drug war or any of those other things, he said. I'm in it for my friends. Wow. That was almost emotional at the end. So, and I'm a softie sometimes, so well, there is that. With that, I'm going to end the article piece there. I loved being able to share those couple stories from folks because, look, if there's success stories, it should be looked at. Is it going to be a success for everybody? Probably not. But if it's a success for a few, that's a few more that can get on with their lives, and that's a good thing. Randy, your thoughts?
Yeah. Look, if it works for them, it works for them. Like I mentioned earlier in this segment, I tend to lean, not be all the way into the libertarian camp, but tend to lean a little bit more that way. So I tend to support people's freedoms to explore things that work in their life within reason. I'm really happy, for Lebecki and, Tylik. Sounds like that they were able to get some relief or a cure in certain circumstances, for what was going on with them. So I'm happy. I think it's a good thing. And I think we need to be open and learn more about this. So, it's kind of a vanilla position from me. I'm not all the way in, all the way out. I just tend to support people's freedoms and I support novel ideas, when people want to try new things. So that's me, Chris. I'll throw it over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, again, I think that we have, especially those who grew up in the 80s, we have a tendency to flash back to LSD and PCP and people jumping off of buildings because they think they could fly. And I think the science and the rigor around these things have come a long way. And that said, there's downsides. There's got to be some element of addiction and some element. But I believe and put my faith in the medical profession. They're closest to the soldiers to determine what is the right solution for their particular ailment, and just pray that the right things get to the right people. And I don't think that we should just shut them off because of any other biases. I think the world of the MDMA, solutions and drugs is a lot different than what we believed it to be back in the 80s. And so hopefully this does get to move forward, and hearing these stories about the impact it's made on some of our veterans' lives just makes me want to be a sponsor of it, even at least a sponsor of more research and looking at the efficacy of these things. Let's take the next step would be my thoughts.
Well said. I agree. Concur with both of you. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.